days.
And now to the Russia investigation. Special Counsel Robert Mueller appears to be connecting the dots between a former Trump campaign aide and Russia. It's in a new court filing. Mueller accusing former Trump campaign deputy chairman Rick Gates of communicating with a person with ties to an ex-Russian spy, this in late 2016. The revelation coming during the sentencing of attorney Alex van der Zwaan, who's been tied to Gates and former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. So what does this mean, if anything, to possibly connecting any dots to the Trump campaign itself? Joining us is Saagar Enjeti. He's a White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. So here, let me just lay it out for everybody. Rick Gates, Paul Manafort's partner and once a deputy campaign manager, this international lawyer, Alex van der Zwaan, and the suspected former GRU agent, Saagar, how do they all tie into each other? Allegedly.
Right, Eric. You know, it's a dizzying web here, and that's really what it comes down to with Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates' connections to these, to the pro-Putin regime in the Ukraine, which is who they were working on behalf of and how they allegedly came into touch with Mr. van der Zwaan. And the biggest accusation that was seen in the filing was the most possible direct link that we've currently seen between a Trump campaign official and an agent of the Russian government. This was a former military intelligence agent of the Russian government, the GRU, and Mr. Gates, who is the deputy campaign manager, was alleged to have known that he was in contact with the person who was in touch with him. Now, but it's important to remember here that all of this was in relation to Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates' business dealings on behalf of the pro-Putin Ukrainian regime at the time, and did not necessarily have anything to do with the Trump 2016 campaign.
And this also is Gates not directly dealing with the suspected GRU former agent, but dealing one step removed.
Right, exactly. So it's a one-step removed process. But however, he was allegedly...
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, he was alleged to have known that he was one step removed from a former GRU agent. So, if that is true, then it is, he absolutely did know that he was in some sort of relationship with somebody who was in connection to an agent of the Russian government.
But some people might say, so what? I mean, was he passing money to the guy? Was he giving secrets to the guy? Was the guy giving him secrets? Were they dealing directly at all? I mean, look, I go and interview a defense attorney who represents a murderer. Does that make me complicit with the murderer?
You're absolutely right, and I don't think that that's what Mr. Gates is being charged here, and this is really a story that people have latched onto because, as we said, it really is the most direct tie that we have seen between a Trump campaign official and an agent of the Russian government. It is tenuous at best, and it is most important to remember here, none of this appears, at least from what we know in the court filings, had anything to do with the campaign. It had to do with their, illegal lobbying on behalf of the Ukrainian government.
And it seems so far that, you've got, for example, General Flynn pleading to lying to the FBI. You got Papadopoulos dealing with lying to the FBI, and then you got Gates, who pled guilty to financial fraud and lying about areas that don't have anything to do with the Trump campaign. Let me read you one point from the Mueller filing. It says this: instead of truthfully answering questions about his contacts with Gates and Person A, that's, we suspect, the GRU guy, van der Zwaan lied. He denied having substantive conversations with Gates and Person A in 2016. When confronted with an email dated September 12, 2016, sent by Person A to van der Zwaan, the defendant again lied. Van der Zwaan, in fact, had a series of calls with Gates and Person A, as well as the lead partner on the matter in September and October 2016. All right, the time period has to do with the election, but the subject matter, accordingly, has nothing to do with Donald Trump, has nothing to do with the campaign, and has nothing to do with the election for president of the United States?
That's absolutely right, Eric. I mean, the thing is to remember here is that, Mr. Gates and Mr. Manafort were involved in their deep, business connections with these agents for quite some time, and that they had a dizzying array of tax frauds that they, tax liens and loan businesses that they had stacked on one another that required them to be in constant contact with their former associates. As I understand it, Mr. Manafort was even trying to, use his position on the campaign in order to alleviate an $18 million debt that he at one point owed to some oligarch. And so it does get very complicated here, but it seems to be largely localized to Mr. Manafort, Mr. Gates, their illegal efforts to lobby on behalf of foreign powers, and really, a way to avoid paying the IRS the multi-millions of dollars that they amassed in lobbying on behalf of foreign governments.
Well, we may learn more this coming week when that lawyer is actually sentenced, and we'll see if he speaks in court. Saagar and Enjeti, thank you so much for joining us on this holiday.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. Arthel?
Eric, hundreds of motorcycle riders rolling in support of a grieving dad. Meadow Pollock was one of the victims.